Hello everyone, this is Mr. Mullo with the 9.4 puzzle time. So the joke for this one is, what does a magician need when he loses his rabbit? So for the first part, we're going to look at 2 out of these 4 first questions. So this one says complete the square for the expression and then factor the trinomial. So I'm going to look at one that's a little nicer, like number 1, and one that has not so great numbers, like number 3. And so remember, to solve these, we need to take half of whatever this b is. So it's usually b divided by 2. And then square it. So for this first one, 12 divided by 2 is 6, and 6 squared is 36. So we're going to put a plus 36 there. So this ends up being, when we factor it, it's going to end up being x minus 6 squared, which would be letter S. And then for number 3, we have x squared plus 7x. So the reason that this one is not as nice as number 1 is because when I do b divided by 2, well, 7 divided by 2 can't happen. It's not it can't happen, but it's not a nice number. We end up getting a fraction. So it's 7 over 2 squared then, which just ends up being letter R then. So we're just going to keep it as a fraction. Same thing when you do your homework and big ideas, leave it as a fraction there. So we can't really do it, otherwise we're going to get some weird decimal, so we just leave it as a fraction. So the important parts of this lesson are questions like 5 through 10. So I'm going to do question 7 for you, and we're going to do this a couple different ways. So I'm going to do it the 3 ways we know how. So let me grab another sheet here. So x squared plus 6x equals 16. So we now know 3 ways how to do this. The first way is to factor it, and this is probably my favorite way and the easiest way. So first I'm going to start off by subtracting 16 from each side. So that gives me x squared plus 6x minus 16 equals 0. And so now this goes back to chapter 7 here of 2 numbers that multiply to negative 16 and add to 6. So that would be a negative 8 and a positive 2. So negative 2 plus 8, positive 8 and a negative 2. Just getting ahead of myself there. So positive 8 and a negative 2. So positive 8 times a negative 2 is negative 16. Positive 8 plus a negative 2 is positive 6. So remember, to solve these, we're just going to set those equal to 0. So x plus 8 equals 0. X minus 2 equals 0. So if I subtract 8 from each side, 0 minus 8 is negative 8. That's where I had the negative 8 in my head from. And if I add 2 to each side, 0 plus 2 is 2. So my 2 answers would be 2 and negative 8. So that would be the first way to do it, by factoring. So where did that answer go? Oops, right there. So the next way to do it would be to do the quadratic formula. So we still need our x squared plus 6x minus 16. So if we do the quadratic formula, so that's negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So here, now if I have negative b, so that would be a negative 6 then. Remember, the number in front of the x squared is the a, so really a 1. Number in front of the x is this b, so really 6. And the number in front, or the number at the end there, is our c. So here I have b is negative 6 plus or minus b squared, so 6 squared, which is 36, and then minus 4ac. Well, we have 4, a is 1, and c is 16. And that's all over 2a, which would be 2. Again, a is 1. So if I simplify this a little bit, I have 4 times 16, and this is a negative 16, is 64. So then I have negative 6 plus or minus, and now this is 36 plus 64, because 4 times negative 16 is a minus 64. So 36 minus negative 64 turns into 100. And then still divided by 2 times 1 is 2. Okay, so now if I actually do the math here, I have 6 plus the square root of 100, which is 10. And then I have 6, negative 6 minus the square root of 100, which is still 10, divided by 2. So now if I solve this, negative 6 plus 10 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Negative 6 minus 10 is negative 16. negative 16 divided by 2 is negative 8. So just like we got last time, negative 8 and 2 are my two answers. Okay, we'll do it the last way we know how. So x squared plus 6x minus 16. Actually, let's rewrite the original equation. Equals 16. So completing the square. So for completing the square, same thing as we did for the first two questions, I needed to half of b and then square it. So remember, b divided by 2 squared. So b is, in this case, is 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 squared is 9. So what I'm going to end up doing is adding 9 to both sides. So now that gives me x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 16 plus 9. So adding 9 to both sides so that my equation is fair and stays the same, I have to do it to both sides. So I'm going to simplify this a little bit. So x squared plus 9 is really the same as x plus 3. And then same thing here. So x plus 3 and x plus 3 is really the same as x plus 3 squared. And then on this side, we still have our 16 plus 9. And now I'm going to simplify that 16 plus 9 into a 25, because that's what 16 plus 9 is. So I'm left with x plus 3 squared equals 25. So I want to get rid of that squared. So I'm going to take the square root of each side. So square root of x plus 3 squared is just x plus 3. Square root of 25, kind of tricky. Some of you are probably thinking, oh, it's 5. But remember, it's also negative 5. So negative 5 times negative 5 is also 25. So I'm really going to have two equations here. So x plus 3 equals 5, and x plus 3 equals negative 5. So then I would do the same work. So subtract 3 from each side. Guess what? I get 2. Subtract 3 from each side. And as you could probably guess, my other answer is negative 8. So I just did that same problem 3 different ways, and I still got negative 8 and positive 2 as my answers every single time. So depending on which method you like, I'm sure most of you probably like the factoring method, but remember, once you get into problems that have no solutions in there, it's kind of hard to know how to factor it like that. So this would be the default. Or same thing if you get ones with fractions and decimals, odds are it's going to be hard to think about what numbers multiply with fractions and decimals to each other or add to each other. This is where you're going to want a method like this or a method like this. All right, and then the last kind of question you had was about minimums and maximums. Okay, so remember minimums and maximums. So questions like 11 and 12. So remember, a positive graph like number 11 is going to open up like this. So there's no maximum on a graph like this. Those arrows means it just keeps going up and up and up and up. So this is going to have a minimum. The minimum's down there. Questions like number 12, since it's a negative x squared, open down like that. So they're going to keep going down and down and down and down. So they're not going to have a minimum, but they are going to have that maximum there. So pretty much, since there's only two options, you can guess which one's going to be which. Okay, but the way to find that is we're going to use our old formula from chapter 8, and that is negative b over 2a. Okay, so if I do negative b over 2a, remember my b is 6, so I have negative 6, which is just positive 6. And then 2 times, and again, a is 1, so 2 times 1 is 2. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. And so that gives us our x in our vertex. And so I know that one's 3. And then the way to find the y here, that negative 5, is I'm going to plug in that 3 into this problem. So instead of x squared, I'm going to have 3 squared. Instead of 6x, I'm going to have 6 times 3 plus 4. So x squared is 9. 6 times 3 is 18 plus 4. So 9 minus 18 is negative 9. Negative 9 plus 4 is negative 5. So that's how you would get the other point in your vertex there.